You can. I'm just saying that it's not proportionate. Y'all white folks have been going ham, and I'm not trying to piss you off. I'm just being honest with you. You know that your people have been going ham, and you need to get them.
Currently,
sounds like the Asians are just getting the short end of the stick.
It was currently
that's racist.
It's roughly 55%.
I got you,
Lactate.
You hear Lactate? He's taking shots, and nobody's gonna call him out. He's not racist because he's white. See, Fabian won't call out Lactate when he makes racist statements. That was obviously a double entendre.
I didn't make a racist statement.
He said Asian people are getting the short end of the stick. What do you think he means by that?
Go on. Topic 1. In a time when schools and parents seem completely unable to proactively protect students, should we have more armed officers in school? Is that the best way to keep kids safe? Will this inevitably end with the criminalization of more children? So this is a conversation we've had a few times here on the channel. But the idea of just increasing law enforcement, increasing their presence, or even if they're not necessarily law enforcement, but just like, armed resource officers. A lot of people think the way to go. It doesn't seem a completely illogical way to go when you're scared for your children, right? Thing might happen to them there, but there's a lot of pushback in a lot of different communities for that. So, here's where you're all at. Let's start with Lactoid.
Generally, I would like to see more safety protocols instituted. I think some of them are just very common sense ones that I don't know why they're not ubiquitous amongst all schools. So I think every door except for the front door should only open from the inside. This should be a general rule, like among all public schools. I think at the front doors where people can come in, there should be an armed officer to check people and make sure that, people aren't coming in armed to the teeth and killing kids. And in line with that, especially with some of the stuff we saw recently in Texas, I think officers need to be better trained when there actually is an active shooter situation, and should be held accountable and should be expected to go into a dangerous situation, because honestly, that's what they're paid for. As to just putting more armed officers wandering around the hallways and cafeterias, I'm pretty skeptical of the cost of this program. I would need to see strong evidence that school resource officers are effective. I tried to find some. I had some difficulty finding solid evidence that school resource officers are actually effective. So I would need to see, pretty solid evidence of that. And I would also want these officers to be trained specifically in dealing with children. I saw a lot of stories that are a little bit, I understand kids can misbehave. I don't think like a middle schooler should be arrested for misbehaving unless that misbehavior poses a threat to the safety of teachers and other students. So I'm not sure about more school resource officers. I am sure that there needs to be more safety protocols.
I think you actually brought up another interesting question. So I might bring that up later on, depending on how the conversation goes. But yeah, thank you so much. Go to Scott.
Yeah, so I'm much of the same mind as Lactoid. I would go a little bit harder in saying we shouldn't be putting additional police officers in schools. I think what we need to do is we need to deregulate security, and we need to have more security officers. And, I understand there are studies that presume that this is somehow has a psychological, negative effect, et cetera. But what we are talking about is, schools that have, that are dangerous at a certain point. Right? Like that you don't really know. I mean, statistically speaking, it's, less dangerous than, the school bus ride there. But nevertheless, it is still, we're still in a situation where schools are dangerous, and we should do what has already been proven to work in Israel. In Israel, there's security firms and, police agents, but usually just security firms that are not directly tied to the state. At every single school, they do not have a problem with school shootings. They do have terrorist attacks, and it is much less frequent that they have terrorist attacks than we have school shootings. I mean, and that ought to tell you something. It's Israel. Like, they're surrounded by people that hate them, and they've figured this out, that when you have a single entry and you have the ability to check who goes in and out of the school, and you have a large fenced off area, and you have enough room in that fenced off area for fire drills and things like that, the only time a terrorist attack is able to really do anything to these schools is when they attack the campus, and they're usually pretty ineffective. So they're not really like the same. They're not soft targets like coffee shops and places like that are in Israel. And so the problem though that I see is that this question of like, should we put cops there is really two big problems. Number one, police officers as opposed to private security are are likely to criminalize students at a higher rate. It's likely to especially impact, poor communities. More kids are going to end up in jail. More kids are going to end up with like criminal records and things like that. Even if you have, police officers that aren't supposed to do that, they do that, and they involve police regularly. And the second is it's not actually addressing the problem, right? Like what we're talking about is mass shooting and school shootings. The problem isn't are there enough cops in schools? The problem is multifaceted issues with our culture, predominantly fatherlessness. And unless we're actually addressing those problems, what we're doing is paying for band-aids that isn't actually going to stop school shootings ultimately. It's just going to reduce the risk.
Oh, Corey.
Yeah, so actually there's decent amount of overlap between some of what Scott said and myself, and also some of Lactoid said and myself in terms of like as what Lactoid pointed out when they went searching for evidence to demonstrate effectiveness of armed presence on school. It does seem like the evidence is pretty scant or mixed at best. And there's also I'm going to try and keep it short because I think there's a lot to unpack here. But I think there should be asking the question of what are the potential unintended consequences in terms of like, sure, maybe having an armed presence, you might decrease maybe school shootings, but there's the unintended potential consequence of like you are potentially increasing guns on schools. Same thing with just something as simple as like security cameras. Like there's evidence showing that like if you just increase security cameras on schools, children don't actually feel safer. Same thing of like, as you increase security, there's some evidence showing that children actually feel less safe. And I don't know that that's necessarily a great thing, given the fact there's already increasing, rates of anxiety. And I don't know that you want to potentially contribute to that. And also, like to Scott's point, where I think an armed presence is, at least in the United States, a band-aid solution, where like there's clearly some sort of larger fundamental issue going on that is driving mass shootings that probably should be addressed. The analogy that comes to mind is like, to address, I don't know, the suicide rate in the United States, banning guns. Like that might have an effect, maybe positive, but that's probably almost certainly not addressing the root issue. And so like, yeah, I think unintended consequences need to be taken into account. And also lastly, I'll just wrap up by saying I'm not 100% sure that the Israel example is the best analogy, just because I think it's fair to say that Israel is in a fairly unique geopolitical situation. And like they have, I think, more legitimate reasons to have a greater armed presence like on their schools.
Let's go to Fanatic.
I think you're muted.
Yeah, he's muted.
Thank you. We've discussed this plenty of times before. There's literally no way that like increasing armed forces is going to like actually fix this situation. We saw what happened, I think, in Uvalde, where they had police officers go there and there was just a standoff, and then it was still free to like pick off kids in that classroom. Police officers a lot of times are function like cowards. There's been a dramatic increase in armed presence at schools since sorry. There's been a crazy increase ever since there was that whole Columbine incident, and they haven't prevented school shootings. There's still been the same amount, in fact, even more. So it's not like that's going to fix anything. I think the better solution is for people to get back to their moral roots. Prayer in schools was a good thing. It gave people a sense of understanding who God was, and I think obviously religion helps build a sense of community. I think having something like that in schools, I think, was probably it was really, really helpful. There used to be prayer in schools. There used to be crosses and things like that. There was a Christian flag at a lot of schools. All these things really helped children feel a better sense of community, a better sense of respect for their brethren. And I think that's what we probably need. We just need better religious foundation. As the country becomes more secular, we become more violent. more rapacious. It's all bad.
Okay, just before we go on, are you serious in that
Dead
prescription?
serious. Yep.
Okay, so we're definitely going to talk about that. I just want to put that out there. This is definitely we're going to talk about that. You've said this before, and I've always been like really unsure how serious you are, but we'll use this opportunity to talk about that. Okay, let's go to a Wick.
Sure. So obviously there's an issue, right? Where we have market ballooning in violence across the school system since about Columbine, right? Since the 70s actually is when we've seen this uptick. It just started ballooning after Columbine. The methods we're doing now aren't working. That isn't to say that they cannot work, however. If we were to create a single point of entry in the school, as Lactoid was talking about, if we were to adjust the measures, I think that we would see a safer place. Would it be entirely safe? Obviously not, right? Like these are symptoms to a larger societal problem. I don't think it's secularism. I would disagree with Fanatic there, but I think that the issue is societal, it is cultural, and it needs to be addressed there. Otherwise, we're just going to be dealing with symptoms rather than the disease.
And because I don't think you said it, you said we can adjust these things, right? Something better. So can we adjust school officers?
Oh yeah, oh sure. To be very clear, like you can have a presence of some sort of guard or security officer at the school and it not be. I think it could be better than it is done now. The problem is it's a largely a kind of a shotgun approach that we've been doing, where no one's really sure how to do it. There is no real data that shows it clearly working, so people are trying different things. But I do not think that it is inherently increasing the problem, right? I just don't think that's true.
Waterkai.
So, from what I'm seeing, a lot of the issues that are going down tend to be in inner city schools. You have metal detectors, all these things going on in these schools. The school shootings aren't happening there. It's in the schools that don't have a predominance of police in them, which is why they had to try to get the cops in at Uvalde. So you're having policemen going down on inner city kids that are catching charges and ending up with a record before they even leave the school. They're already at risk. This is compounding issues. That's taxpayer money going to give your kids a record. On top of that, you have the psychological effect of having cops around you at all times. People already aren't easy about that. And so when you got school officers yanking kids out of desks and slamming them on the ground, that is going to psychologically stunt you. So I don't believe we should have officers. We should have private school security. And if you want to have someone at the door with a gun, that's perfectly fine. But beyond that, no, cops aren't helping.
Right. I think we have some disagreement here. Let's go to Doobie.
I agree with just about everything Lactoid said earlier. I don't know if I can say it any better. I don't think that I'm not sure that the school resource officer or police officer on campus is the way to go. But I think clearly there are lots of things we can do to turn the school into like a fortress, right? Where children feel safe in there and are safe in there, just like they do in Israel. Right? So I think it's there's plenty of lessons to learn from that.
So I think it's interesting that you guys, because in the question, I didn't put school shooting. Right. I'm rereading it again to make sure I didn't. Yeah, I didn't put school shooting, but that seems to be the thing that you guys all focused on. But there are plenty
well, to be clear, like I'm not thinking about school shootings primarily. I'm thinking about what Lee brought up. Inner city schools, right? Because I went to a school, one of those schools. And you had a ton of drug dealers coming by all the fucking time. They sell drugs to kids, fucking with the kids when they're walking to class. Between classrooms, so keeping those people out is far more important than the one-off school shootings that you get once in a while.
Well, yeah, but you didn't say school shootings, but you definitely mentioned schools and parents being able to protect students and armed officers. Aside from school shootings, what other motive would we have to be arming, putting armed?
Violence between
like
children.
The connotation was in the question.
Wait,
sure.
Wait, did you say violence between? Do you think that that's a genuine prescription? Oh, children are fighting each other. Let's have armed cops there to stop the fighting.
Or whatever,
What?
violence against teacher.
Hey, whoever starts
come
the
on.
aggression, right? You just gotta.
Come on.
I live in a city where in the past they've had multiple like straight up no fucking around riots in high schools and middle school, right? Like actual fucking riots. I you know, I've seen like incredible violence in between students, and sometimes it happens with teachers too, right? I've heard stories about like violence that people get caught up in. So in that case, since there's since shootings aren't the end all be all in terms of dangers, right? Like where Doobie was trying to go at, then it would seem to me that having more armed officers to deal with that, right? To calm a situation like that doesn't seem completely irrational.
Wait, what other situation? Name a specific situation. Like
I just did little riots.
I don't think a
Okay,
gun
okay,
would
okay,
even
What do you
wait,
want the
work, though.
cops to do in a
wait,
riot?
I mean, I'm saying, what is the purpose of the
Shoot
gun?
the kids? Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's the purpose of a gun in that situation? So a police officer has a gun, and there's a riot happening. Do you think he should be shooting children that are doing, or what do you think the gun? What role does the gun actually serve in disarming that riot?
Well, some would say, I wouldn't say deterrent, but some might make that argument.
I'm asking Prime, since that's what
Okay,
he said.
fair.
That's what he seems like he's suggesting. You're
I'm
saying that guns, armed officers, armed. You specifically mentioned armed officers. So the arm in there should probably serve some sort of purpose. And so I'm asking you, what would they do with such arms in a situation that would that you would say would make sense for them to have to be there?
Make it easier to take control of the situation.
Okay, and how would they take control of the situation with a gun? Would you think that they should pull the gun out and point it at the students, or what are you saying? What utility does the gun specifically play in that?
You
sort of
don't have to
scenario?
necessarily take a weapon out to use it to gain control, right? That's why you see officers do this all the time, where they put their hands on their rifles, right? Like to
sort of threaten
for the threat of
some
authority.
degree.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
escalate
But-
the
Yeah,
situation,
but
you
that
mean?
works.
So
No,
Cops never
Frank,
do that.
that works because there is this implicit threat of force behind it that people know that cops
Sure.
have no problem, at least in America, pulling it out and pulling that trigger. So I guess to the point is, I don't think it would be a deterrent. Like this wouldn't stop or deter the riots in any way, shape, or form.
But even more so, so you're saying, and I don't feel like
No.
I'm being clear
Sorry,
about
hon. I'm not making some sort of massive policy prescription. I'm saying that like it doesn't seem illogical for to get to that conclusion, right? Like so.
I got you. And if it doesn't, then that's what we're trying to suss out, because it does sound incredibly illogical to me. So I'm trying to
Okay.
figure out why it doesn't sound illogical to you. So that's why I'm asking you these specific questions. So like you would say that obviously, because the reason why the cop putting his hand on the weapon, as someone already stated, it's because it's menacing. It's the idea that this cop
Mhm.
is liable to pull this trigger, or to actually pull this gun out. That is a scary thing. So you are saying, in the event of a riot, that having an officer that's able to threaten people with the gun, basically, that would probably be preferable because it would help stop the riot.
I'm saying that among in a situation like that, most people aren't actually troublemakers. Most people, in a riot, most people aren't there to necessarily perpetuate the violence, right? Most people are very confused as to what's going on. However, there are some individuals who take advantage of violent situations like that, right? Like we've seen this in the news where there's a chaotic situation and people simply will not respect order. So among those individuals, you could
Would you consider those people super predators there, PrimeCayes? Because that's all I'm hearing. I'm just hearing Joe
They're-
Biden
Well,
and Hillary Clinton in the 90s.
no.
We got to stop the relative
So-
few super predators.
Just
Let's
Like,
not go there.
no.
This makes me
Real
think.
quick.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick though, like, so one of the issues in a riot situation or a situation where you have all these things, you're absolutely right that most people aren't there to instigate violence. Most people are just kind of confused, kind of going along with the crowd.
Yeah.
That's what makes it incredibly dangerous to have armed individuals there because they cannot tell. At least usually, there's a lot of confusion. So they don't know who's actually instigating it, and so this threat and things, if it's just on a, I see it going wrong real quick with very little upside to this. That's just my thing. I don't see it as a logical thing. Like, I'm with Fnatic on this. I don't see that there's a logical way that this is going to de-escalate the situation in any scenario I can think of off the top of my head.
I don't know if this is for de-escalation at that point. So like there is if there are people who are in that scenario a threat to others, right? Those individuals, and those individuals we want to we'd want someone to be able to bring force to I'm not sure the word to use here. Like the thing that comes in my mind, neutralize, but that's not the word I want to use. But to pacify or something, right? And if those individuals would refuse to like end their violence, then it would seem to then bringing some sort of force on them would be necessary. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be lethal force, right? It doesn't have to be guns, right? So when we're talking about an armed response can take a lot of different forms, right?
But when you say should we arm cops or should we arm guards at school, no one thinks taser. None of us thought taser. Did anyone here think taser?
Of course
Nope.
not.
I
Yeah,
just thought
but
prison.
yeah,
I thought
sure,
bazooka.
whatever. But that's fine. Whatever. I'm saying
I'm
it now.
thinking
So with
of
the
the
updated,
Having a
traumatization.
discussion. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
but
so
my
with
point is
the
that like when
your
we're
child is
talking about an
being
arm, hold on a second, guys. We're talking about an arm response. So within an arm response, like there are many different options. There's many crowd control options. Like when you're stopping right, like outside of school, stopping out right outside of school, the officers that respond, they're armed. And that doesn't mean that we mow down the crowd. That seems to be like the only policy, or sorry, no, but the only outcome you guys see here. I'm saying that like when you have a weapon, whatever that weapon is, like you or what are the weapons you have available, use the one that is appropriate. So it seems like within the myriad types of violence that could happen within a school, you'd want officers to have a myriad sort of options, right? Now, if you can say, then it absolutely has to be non-lethal force. I'd be fine with that. Hey, I don't want like dead kids in the school, but when
Would you be
we
fine with a fight being broken up with tasers? Like
That's what I
non-lethal, like
wanted to ask. That's
yeah,
exactly what I
like
wanted to
a
ask.
couple kids are just like maybe a group of kids are just beating the shit out of each other. You would be okay with people
uh
tasing
maybe
those involved?
not, probably not. If that fight involves like weapons, like knives or something,
Fair.
or like then maybe it needs to be maybe they need to use taser. But like I'm saying that it doesn't have to be a one size fits all package, right? So
Right.
it doesn't seem illogical that we would have that. Lactoid, you had your hand up.
yeah. So as you're talking, I guess I am starting to think of some examples where maybe even I mean I'm not going as far as to say we should have lethal force on school resource officers besides maybe at the front door, but I can start to think of situations like non-school shooter situations in which force would, like you're saying, be completely rational. So let's say I'm a teacher walks in the bathroom and like some kids getting jumped by like 8 kids, or like it's like a gang fight or something, and like one
Yeah.
kid's like getting the actual like the snot beat out of him. People die from that, right? Like brain damage, really terrible stuff. And like the teacher or the officers like get off him and they're not, and this kid's like in critical danger. I would want somebody to be able to like pull out maybe like hit them with pepper balls, or something just to like get them to stop. When it comes to like if there's a riot in a school, I mean, I don't know how common this is. It seems like something that we could just have like local police departments deal with. But in terms of like kids getting jumped or like serious fights happening, I would think that's probably common enough that school resource officers should be armed to an extent to like stop students from being in imminent harm in that situation, right? I mean, like a kid getting jumped, we agree that an officer should be able to like to maybe pepper ball the kids that are like stabbing him with pencils.
Yeah.
Sure.
I actually
think-
completely disagree. And here's why I completely disagree. I think that what we have done is we have a culture that is devoid of fathers. We have schools that are devoid of masculine male role models. And then what we have is shitty school systems and a whole myriad of other problems that we're not solving. And so we're then coming to this place where we've also defanged teachers by like firing them, suing them, and like the whole world coming after them if they happen to physically break up a fight. And so now what we're doing is we're begging the government to bring in its fucking hired mercenary thugs to police our fucking schools like a goddamn prison. And we're all just sitting like, well, yeah, what if a terrible fight breaks out? Yeah, if a terrible fight breaks out, you should call the cops, right? But there's so many other prescriptive things that we could be doing here to not criminalize children in the fucking schools. And we don't necessarily need cops. We can have security. Like you can have a security guard that has the authority to do these things, but is confrontational with the police and is a part of the school and is a part of the community and can be hired and fired at the school's will, as opposed to a police officer that is only partially beholden to the school system and ultimately is going to give these kids a fucking record. Like it's just insane to me that we solve this problem with cops when what we really need to be doing is we need to be doing what dads in schools is doing. We need to be bringing fucking fathers from the community and have them rotating and being in the school and having a positive male, like experience in the schools. This is actually shown to work, right? This is taking schools that have fights and like drugs and violence and crime all in the schools. And just by having a couple of fathers from the community talking to kids, being there and having that presence,
Like
they feel
Dare,
safer.
but for fathers and stuff.
No, we're not talking about Dare. Like Dads in Schools is a program in where one school had like a really, really bad crime problem. And there was tons of fights that happened back to back. And so a bunch of fathers were sick of it and said, we're going to do a rotation. And like, so that like one of us takes a day off work, like once a week, and we go to the school and we're just there. They're not doing anything other than like telling dad jokes and being there. And it drastically reduces crime and violence in the schools because there's no fucking male role models there. There's a couple of fucking cucked out teachers that are dudes. And then it's just and then it's just a bunch of fucking women. We have a bunch of kids with no fathers and broken homes going to a school run like a prison by a bunch of fucking women and cops.
I don't know if this would translate nationally, right? Because there are schools with a lot of male influence in there. And there's a lot of men, teachers and things like that. I don't know the specific stats off the top of my head, but what you are describing, and I don't know the specific program, but it sounds a lot like what I went through in Dare, where they had positive role models come in to tell us how drugs were bad and things like that, and to provide I've never done drugs and I'm a great person type of thing. It sounds very 1-to-1, but maybe I'm missing it. It was
always a cop though, Wick, right?
Not always. No, not always.
I mean, I won a Dare medal. Okay, I was
fair enough. It was
I've never seen it not be a cop.
I literally have a medal from Dare. They only
keep in mind I was on a military bases for a lot of cases, so a lot of cases it was military people too.
No. I'm not talking about bringing people out of the community.
Yeah,
it was cops for me too. But I'm talking about like people that have children in the schools, that are fathers of children in the schools, that are a part of the community, volunteering together their time and pooling it so that it doesn't take too much of their finances away, so that fathers and men can be present in the school. Just their presence alone and the jokes and the fact that like someone that is like a part of the community, or like Timmy's dad or whoever's fucking dad is there, changes the feeling of that environment and drastically changes the way that the students interact with each other. Just having a male presence.
Really quick story time. I remember there was this one fight I went to the school, high school, and there was this one situation where this girl had gotten in a fight and her mom decided to come up to the school and that she was going to fight a person. Now, this school required us to wear uniforms. We had to wear red, white, and blue. We could not wear red jeans. You had to wear blue or white jeans. And you had to wear red, white, or blue and blue shirts. And your shoes had to be red, white, or blue, which was the most retarded thing in the planet to me. If you're trying to avoid gang violence and you're going to make the very colors red and blue. And so, of course, you had the Bloods that were sitting there with the red do-rags, and they had, they'd have red shoelaces, and they'd wear it was just obviously a red shirt. And the do-rag would just be hanging out of the back pocket because they weren't allowed to actually wear the cap. Such an idiot. But America, right? Anyway, one of these mothers decided to come down to the school, and she decided she wasn't going to let her daughter be the one that caught that L. So she puts on the uniform, and it's just hanging around in the school all day. Finally, it gets to the lunch break. Tells the daughter, "Yeah, what's good? Yeah, it's time now. Y'all about to run this back." Jumps lets her daughter start fighting her. Feels like her daughter's getting washed. Jumps in the fight and starts putting hands on her. Insane story. I'll never forget it. The point is, you can say it might have worked out for this group of people where it was like, hey, the dads decided to volunteer and like help out and like get involved and yada 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 yada. I do not like the idea of like having untrained people and untrained parents just being in these sort of situations, because some people are retarded. Some people would go there and be incredibly biased, and if they felt like there was something happening, they would actually go psycho. How many times do you actually get trained security guards and they go psycho too and don't know their limits? The idea that I'm going to just put my faith in just random fathers to be able to do this is just crazy to me. I'm not doing it.
Also,
I'm
who
not
can
saying
take
it
off
has to
a
be
whole day a
random
week?
dads, right? Like it's not.
No.
I mean, it doesn't.
So
have to
which
be
dads would it be
random
then?
dads.
Which,
Like I'm saying, like you could institute training. Like there are ways to do this where it doesn't have to be, primary, like where it is either self-regulating or even like have programs set up by the school where they like work with specific fathers, or that there's training that they get and things like that. But what I'm saying is having a positive male, um, role model, or just energy there, changes the way that people feel in a way that having an armed cop doesn't. Having an armed cop doesn't make you feel safe. A lot of these kids. It makes
I
them
think you're
feel like they're in prison.
downplaying. I think you're downplaying the role of male teachers. Male teachers exist throughout the school system. I know I went into military schools, but like I get it. Like in public schools, I see them all the time. I know people who are men who work in the public school system. Why does it have to be specifically fathers from the community? Why could not it simply be a male role model in a math teacher or a gym teacher or a coach or
Or
I don't
guidance
know,
counselor.
whatever, right?
Nobody. I don't think anybody is making the argument, right?
You were
that
saying
male
that there's a
teachers
lack of
don't
this in
exist.
school. Okay.
There
You're
obviously
saying
is a
there's a
lack
lack.
of it. Right.
Yeah,
The
but
idea that you're going to make the argument that male teachers exist, therefore schools have all of the male.
I guess I just
it's
want to
just
see it that
dismissive and silly.
well, no. So,
well,
but
so
Scott,
is we're gonna stop school shootings with dad jokes too, but whatever.
like it seems I don't know the scenario that you've outlined all that well, and if you want to like send the story or like the study, by all means, I'm curious to read about it. But like it seems like you're like attributing like was the conclusion that like as a result of the increased masculine energy like just violence went down, or like is it increased supervision? I think you are associating something. Like I don't see why something as simple as like increased supervision from like guidance counselors, of having just a more supervision, more camaraderie, fostering a more friendly environment. I don't unless like you actually have conclusive evidence showing like it's this increase in masculine energy that whatever aggression and violence goes down, and like that's I think that's a pretty dubious claim.
Like in terms of bringing men into the school, what was it about that changed it? You could make those arguments that it was camaraderie, that it was simply additional adult presence. You can make all of those arguments. But in terms of diagnosing, I think what is one of society's biggest problems right now for our youth as fatherlessness, I think there is a myriad of data that shows that this is a serious problem. And when you look at school shooters specifically, right, not looking at, well, we can look at gang violence, and we can look at like, crime and things like that. There's all between them, there is a common thread, which is very often it is a lack of father in the home that leads to higher crime, more drug and alcohol abuse, lower health outcomes, higher
I
rates
don't
of teen
believe that.
pregnancy.
That
Yeah,
is largely a
Scott, yeah.
socioeconomic
Academic
issue.
failure.
No. Scott's going to
the-
have to show us something that proves that, because first off, the vast majority of school shooters are white. The vast majority of school shooters are white, and we obviously know that white people have significantly less of a fatherlessness in the home problem than black students. Yet it seems like the hyper majority of school shooters are white people. This sounds like complete hogwash to me. You have any data to support what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm going to throw it in the chat right now. So this is a study from 2018 that looked at like the top 75 most cited school shooters, 25 school shooters, and broke down what were the issues in their life. 75% of them didn't have a father at home.
You do realize that single parent families exist in other countries, right? Like the UK also has like single parent families, and they don't have the same outcome.
I don't understand. I don't understand this. It's like
Well,
so you're trying to deny
that
it's in the chat, right? In StreamYards. I posted in the StreamYards.
Can you just put it in the dang Discord where everyone uses? No one.
I mean, well, because it requires me. Well, maybe if fucking PrimeCayes got his shit together and didn't use two different.
This is a very incomplete
use
list
Discord
here.
where we put every fucking thing. Okay, whatever.
Right, I gotta switch. I gotta switch windows and shit.
He's gotta switch windows and shit.
Yeah,
Okay.
all they did was take a sample.
If you get your shit together, Scott, you can change windows.
Yeah, all this is here is it took a sample of 56 school shooters and it listed what their parental status was. That's literally all I'm seeing.
Which proves nothing.
I mean, it's an incredibly school shooters.
Wait,
is an
school shooters, or are you talking about like?
Igniter.
No. This is
Like
already
real
really,
school
really, really
shooters.
bad. Because like when you talk about school shooters, like how are they defined? Are they just talking about people like who get involved in like gang confrontations at school and shoot? Are you talking about like the white mass school shooting things that we're talking about?
You brought up specifically the white children in school shooters. I brought up specifically when I started my argument that, like, yes, we can talk about crime. Yes, we can talk about gang violence. But when we're talking about school shooters, as an example, one of the big problems, one of the big common threads amongst all of them is not having a father at home. The idea
not having a greater income
at this point.
Like, can you tease it out, the difference between
what fucking liberal fucking stupidity
I'm not a liberal
is this
at all.
What progressive stupidity is this to simply deny the obvious thing that we have so much data to show that fatherlessness is a serious problem for people.
Look,
it's considered an ACE. It's an adverse childhood event as far as ACE triggers are concerned. Yes, it is. There are plenty of studies that control for poverty in terms of drug and alcohol abuse, health outcomes, academic
one
success,
of those,
teen
please.
pregnancy.
Not this one.
How many fucking
crazy.
studies do you want? What is known as
Just
common
one.
fucking knowledge?
Right,
fine. I'll go to Google Scholar and give you a fucking study
But
because you're
again, what you're trying to do is you're saying,
requires
look, you're saying that there is a
Oh my
problem
God.
in America with lack of male role models, fatherlessness. Okay, fair enough, but you also have to show that it has led directly to increased school violence, and I don't think this study does. That's
not the argument. That wasn't the argument that I was making. I was basically saying that, like, to me, again, because it's like one of those things where remember when like mass shootings was trending and people started saying, well, they ignore all of these mass shootings, right? And that there was an obvious difference in the mass shootings, right? Because when you start talking about, okay, a guy goes to a freaking to a nightclub and gets into a physical altercation with a person there, and then pulls out a gun and starts shooting at that individual. But there are more than 4 people there, then that can be considered a mass shooting. But in this scenario, this is not the same like wanton, white rage that we're talking about that we typically see at these school shootings. This is a person that's responding to a violent altercation, and they're obviously different. So then that's why I'm asking you, like, when they're talking about school shootings, because yes, if you go to like inner city schools where some of those kids might have some guns, they're not going there and just wantonly shooting up random people at the school like the white people do. They're involved in like an altercation with an individual and shooting at an individual. And so there would be a school shooting there, but that's obviously different than what we're talking about when we're typically talking about school shootings.
Yes. So I just gave you fatherlessness and crime Google Scholar search since 2018 because to like give you all of the studies, we'd be here for like months.
No. I didn't ask you whether or not there was an increase between fatherlessness and crime. That's not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you was specifically about the first thing that you talked about, right? All that other non sequitur retardation that everybody else wants to go down on those crazy rabbit holes is beyond me, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm specifically
asking?
asking you, do you have the thing that you're talking about when they're talking about school shooting? Are they talking about, and I really thought I explained this already, but I'll do it again.
Oh my
Are
God,
they-
just ask the fucking question, dude.
I am asking the
Stop
question,
gish
but
galloping.
I did ask the question last time and you didn't answer. So now I'm having to ask it again and I'm frustrated.
Shut the fuck
So
up and ask the question.
actually be patient when I take the time to actually ask you a question and you don't actually answer.
Just
Then
ask
actually be
the
patient when I
question.
re-ask the question. Are we talking about school shootings like such as when you talk about like an You know what? Why am I asking you? I'm just gonna go ahead and dismiss it. I don't want to entertain him anymore. He's being talking to. Move past it.
I just gave you like 30.
No, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. I don't care. No one's asking you. I didn't ask you for studies, you retard. You're retarded. I didn't ask you for studies, you idiot.
Wouldn't we
You're
agree
freaking
though?
idiot. You're such
Wouldn't
an
we
idiot.
agree that if we're concerned about
Why do I
Freaking
come
Muncie.
here?
I don't know. I wish you wouldn't. You literally ruin panels.
Yeah, okay. Hey,
Oh,
let's
God.
knock it off. Let's knock it off.
Jesus.
Let's knock it off. We love you all.
Freaking
Lactoid.
stupid.
There's no moderation and pure stupidity.
maybe I can bridge
Okay.
the gap here.
Yell at me now. Okay, Lactoid, please go ahead.
Okay. So, if I'm not mistaken, Fennec, it seems like you're asking for and I apologize if I'm missing the point too. You're asking for a specific study as to single motherhood rate as it affects school shootings. You know, obviously not related to gang shootings, but kind of the random attacks that we commonly is culturally known as school shootings.
Yeah, you got it. He just didn't because he's.
So I don't have one.
This is the first fucking thing I gave you, dipshit. He's looking at all the big school shootings. They're gonna break down to their family.
Let's go.
Idiot. It's okay. Be quiet.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So,
Jesus.
boy, let's just focus. Lactoid, please.
So what's Scott's saying is that, well, he has something. I haven't read it over yet, but if we're talking about school safety, yeah, we have to be concerned about like the random school shootings for sure, and we should plan around those. But at the same time, like just because school shootings are sometimes gang related doesn't mean like, I'm not saying you're saying that we don't have to care about those, but I think we should that's part of school violence too. And that's something that we should also plan around. So when we're talking about like, what are the ways that like we can make schools safer? And Scott's saying, well, here are things that are like contributing to unsafe schools. You know, it could be that single motherhood is related to this, maybe just not specifically on the random attacks, but maybe on overall safety, right?
Well, sure, but Lactoid, but that's an entirely different conversation. Because if we were going to be talking about like what's happening regarding like gang shootings, then the prescription are going to be obviously different than what's going to be happening for the white rage shootings, which seem like random and unnecessary and unfounded, right? We obviously understand that the clear and concise correlation between like poverty and crime, poverty and violence, fatherlessness and violence. We get those things, but those don't seem to be the driving force between the white rage shootings, right? Because the white rage shootings, like for example, Columbine, those kids had parents. That wasn't what stopped them. The Uvalde shooting, they had a parent. That they had both parents. That wasn't what stopped him. Or the one shooting that happened during that. Yes, he did. Or the one shooting that happened
with his grandparents because his parents.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. That one wasn't. It was the other one. The one that happened during the pandemic. Clearly, both that person's parents were there, and in fact, his parents were literally trying to flee to Canada and were aware of what was happening. His dad was very much in the home, and in the vast majority of those kind of white rage school shootings, I would I would probably believe. That in most of those cases, those people have fathers at the home. I have no reason to believe that I have no reason to believe otherwise, and I don't think that I don't think that this retard is actually providing us with any study to say otherwise. He's just talking about random school shooting. I mean, just random school shootings, which can of course obviously include the ones that are gang related and with all the black folks and so on and so forth. But if we were,
I'm literally not. You're fucking lying.
The prescription for these two is obviously different.
Even if
I literally linked to a site that said school shooters, the myth of the stable home, and it looked at all of the like their predominant.
Which type of school shootings? Which type of school shootings?
These are the mass shootings.
Does it involve
the media garner attention?
Okay,
and look
does
into
it include any of the other mass school shootings? Wait, I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm sorry. We're just gonna move past that. Yeah, but you got my point, Lactoid. You can respond.
But
lying, pivoting piece of shit.
Yeah, it's me.
So I'll have to read it over, and I will, Scott. But the thing is, and maybe I'm missing some broader point being made. But if we're talking about making schools safer, it could be that the prescription for addressing white rage shooters and addressing like gang shooters are different. But if we're talking about making but if we're talking about making schools safer, like addressing one is better than addressing zero, and addressing both of them would be the best, right? So we could implement things like what Scott's talking about, like I don't think bringing in fathers is like economically viable. I don't think most people can take one day off a week. But assuming that we had some kind of program like that, maybe that would help reduce, like, maybe not like the weird mass shoot, like the white rage mass shootings, but maybe the other forms of school violence, maybe would help reduce that and make schools a safer place overall.
Well, yeah, I would say that it's this. Because if you want to ask me what the actual answer is for the other ones, the gang-related shootings and things like that, I think the obvious answer is just, give Black folks their reparations, help them be able to actually get into a better economic standing, so that would encourage more fathers to be in the home, and encourage a better culture, and all of those sorts of things. I think that's probably the easiest prescription there. But if you want to start talking about the white ones, a lot of these people are coming from like economically stable homes and things like that with both parents and things like that. And then those people are still going off in this white rage because probably maybe the media lies to them, or, racism denial and all that, not denialism, all those other issues. But yeah, so I'm saying that there are totally different prescriptions. So you probably need to identify which one, because the approach to fixing the problem is going to be widely different.
I also want to say one last thing.
Insane.
So I don't agree with a lot of what was just said, obviously, but
yeah, because it's just Marxist bullshit rhetoric.
One thing I want to finish on. It's a little bit unrelated, but I was also, while I was looking stuff up, I also looked up some interesting stuff about prayer in schools. And before, in the decade of 1960 and before, the school shootings in the United States didn't go above 20 per decade. And then in the decades after prayer in schools was banned, they start increasing exponentially. It could be a correlation. I want to throw
definitely a correlation. That's been my point from the very beginning.
Okay. Let's.
I'm just saying, like, you know what else decreased, or I should say increased after prayer in schools got taken out? We have increased diversity in schools. We have increased inclusion with minority communities. Is there a correlation there? Probably not, right? But these two things happened. Some, and the trend line changed. So why not,
That's
right?
not how correlations work.
No, that's definitely not. And then let's also not forget the fact that the vast majority, that like a huge portion of Black folks are still in very segregated schools in different areas, because people, like, segregation is still happening at a de facto level in this country. We're always constantly seeing the news stories about like the people who are being denied like home loans because they're Black, or being told which areas to go to. They've proven this extensively and like in all these different regions. So you still have a lot of people who are incredibly segregated, where you got Black kids that are going to school where it's like almost fully Black and so on and so forth. So
and there's still
maybe
a lot
the
of
only
religious
places where there's
influence in schools
not
as well. There's still a lot of religious influence in schools, where, like, again, people would have prayer circles outside their flag, at the flagpole in the morning, right? This happens all the time. There are after-school programs in many states, like Alabama, Georgia, Texas, etc. That still, they're not officially sponsored by the schools, of course, but they still exist, right? And like, to act as if we have entirely,
if it's not associated with the school, then why are you trying to list it as if it's associated with the school?
Because you are trying to imply that it's simply no longer being associated with schools means A, it doesn't exist, and B, it has led to this huge increase.
I don't have to say that it doesn't exist. I'm saying that if it's not associated with the school, then that means that it's probably not going to be at the forefront, and therefore then like the benefits that we're talking about aren't going to be largely accessible to the vast majority of people. Those things are going to be like, I don't have to go into any more do that.
Sure.
You obviously,
but you do not think that religion's accessible to the majority of children today
in schools? Absolutely not.
Okay.
I mean, nigga, this is factual. Like, why are we even arguing this?
I mean, sure.
You're saying sure, and it sounds like you're being sarcastic.
Yes, a little bit, because America, it's very easy for most children, I won't say all, in most
in school
to access it. Why does it specifically have to be in school?
Because we're talking about schools right now. So see, that's the dishonest thing that you did.
No,
you literally asked me the words. Do you think that they're able to access it in school? I said no, not in school. And then now you're saying, well, why are you talking about school specifically? Dishonest person. That's why I said there's two people I didn't want to interact with, and you're one of them. Go ahead, talk to someone else.
We're talking about
someone else, you idiot. Talk to someone else. Save it for somebody who
okay. I will talk to whoever the fuck I want, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it.
Oh, there's something I could do. I'm gonna do it right now. I'll just mute you, you freaking idiot. You're not worth talking to.
Go ahead. Mute me all you want. But
I got you.
What do you want to say?
Because what you say doesn't matter, because we've already established.
Quick. Talk to me. What did you want to say?
My point is that, at least in America, right? At least in the system that we have in America, we are still culturally largely religious in many, many places. And to act as if this influence of religion in our everyday lives is somehow gone, right, is amazing to me. Obviously, it's not. Obviously, and especially in certain southern communities and things like that, Alabama, Florida, Texas, etc., the Bible Belt, right? These play a large influence in children's lives today. And again, saying that prayer was taken out of school and thus there is no longer this religious influence over kids. Like, again, it's dishonest to frame it as simply a school issue because this is a larger cultural issue. School is one part of the larger cultural umbrella we have. And to fail to understand that, it's just to fail to understand basic concepts, right? And that's fine. And Fanatic's already demonstrated he fails. Failure Fanatic here has failed again to understand basic cultural concepts, and that's fine. That's all I have to say. We'll move on.
Thank you for that.
To be fair to Fanatic here, my Israel example is an incredibly religious group with a lot of prayer in schools. But causation is not correlation. But I don't know that. I mean, it would be interesting to see a study on that. Like if there actually is like a study on like a school where religious practices were banned and then they were instituted later to see like if like there's like something more closely measurable. But I would say that there is something to be said about the Christian ethos, right, and what that does as a whole, right? Like not one individual part of it, like prayer in schools, but like a lack of our culture has clearly gone through a secularized kind of movement that has brought with it a lot of other things, including fatherlessness, right? I mean, like, we used to, in 1960, 5.3% of children were born out of wedlock in America. Now it's 40.6. You can't say that that's not in some part due to a lack of or a growing kind of like secular environment, right? So there's a lot of factors that are going to interweb, right? No fault divorces is going to be part of it, right? Like women's rights is going to be part of it, but some of that's going to be lack of religion.
I don't know. I think, look, I guess that would play some part, but I would look to other sources before blaming it there, right? Like,
I mean, how would that not have an effect?
I literally said
sex out of wedlock.
I literally said just now that it would have some effect. All right, that would have part of it. Right, that would be part of it. Okay. I guess I would also first look to socioeconomic conditions, right? Like, do we have the socioeconomic conditions that are conducive to families forming and staying together? Looking at our carceral state.
We don't. We have welfare. Unfortunately, we have welfare. We got rid of welfare. We'd have better families.
We don't have.
But our carceral state would be part of that, right? I'm sorry, I could come up with a bunch of other answers as well. But yes, like you've seen, secularization could have an issue, right? Or people are more willing to divorce when before they weren't willing to divorce. Yeah, sure, but is that always even necessarily a bad thing? No, it isn't. So right, I would
39% of school age children, grades 1 through 12, are in a single mom household.
Yeah,
that's a problem.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not a problem. But
go ahead, Brian. So Scott, then I would ask you, why is this? So, especially when it comes to mass shootings, why is it uniquely sort of largely the United States? As in, like the EU, I'll link it in the Discord. The EU, there's a rise of single parent families, or largely single mothers, across the world. Okay, and if you look at the outcomes in terms of like single mothers in the EU versus single mothers in the United States, single parent families in the EU fare better, not because they've gotten rid of welfare, because there's more benefits, more support for single parent families. So you need to explain to me, if it's like exclusively fatherlessness, why is fatherlessness less of an issue in the EU and not in the United States?
I wouldn't claim that it's less of an issue in the EU, but you're only talking about school shootings at that point. And I'm like, there's
all measures.
There's no lessening. So you're saying that suicidality rate isn't a problem in the EU as well?
No, it's less of a problem. Same with crime as well. A bunch of statistics or outcomes.
You have different countries, different cultures, different demographics, right? So but the idea that like if you're looking at the other ones, you're saying, oh, it's slightly less, and that must be because welfare good. Like,
No, it's
you know what I mean?
significantly
Like, I don't.
less. Like I
Okay, so
linked through that.
what is the suicide? Do you have a link for the suicidality rate amongst teenagers is significantly less? And I
well,
don't
so
just mean
I've
statistically significantly, but
yeah.
colloquially.
So I've linked it to you previously, but I'll link it again, especially when it comes to like deaths of
Oh, I see.
despair, and this is something that they highlight in terms of like the United States appears to be an outlier, as in like when it comes to single parent families. The U.S.
Can
is
you show the trend? Is there one that shows a trend, like the percentile increase per capita of suicidality over the last like 10 or 20 years in the EU compared to the US? Because I think that's going to be far more important, because maybe we can actually isolate some variables here and determine whether or not the EU's culture or their other things are a factor. Because
I
if they have
will
the same relative increase, then we kind of have our answer.
yeah, but I'm gonna link it in a moment. But I linked it to you previously. It's gonna be like roughly the same graph.
We'll
Uh,
go to Doobie.
Yeah. What? Okay, cool.
While you guys are again together, we'll go to Doobie. And I've not finished with Fnac. I actually would like to talk about the prayer thing. But Doobie, please.
He'll just get mad and mute you too. But
Well, so I was looking through the.
This is probability of death. This isn't
I
dealing
looked
with
at the thing
suicidality.
that Scott posted, right? That listed all the school shooters, 56 of them, I think, going back to the 60s. And then found that only like 18% of them had stable households. And I heard Fanatic's concerns, right? That, hey, sometimes they will list gang violence as like a school shooting. So I went through each of these people, because it does have their names there, one by one, and it seems like they didn't do that. Right? They're not listing gang activity. They're not listing fights that got out of hand. They're listing people who showed up at school and started shooting people, or killed the parents, or killed someone else somewhere else, and then went to school and shot up the classroom or whatever the fuck. And it seems like in this group of 65 people, I think it is, or I'm sorry, 56 people. Only 18% had stable households. And to be clear, like the ones that didn't have stable households, that doesn't mean it was a single parent. In some cases, like the father was beating the kids, the parents were alcoholics or drug addicts, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So a stable household doesn't mean, both your parents are there.
Yeah, the majority still didn't have a father in the household, but you're right. There was, there was other factors. They were looking at like trying to isolate like everything in terms of, they were trying to debunk this idea, this myth that is out there that like mass shooters, school shooters have like, they come from like a good family and like no one could have seen this coming. It's like, no, the overwhelming majority of them have really fucked up home lives, and the overwhelming majority of them don't have a father in the household.
The problem with
And
the
unfortunately,
study
that would make sense,
specifically-
right?
Yeah, the problem
Yeah.
with the study, at least the one you linked, is they don't give any methodology. They stick to how did they choose these 56 particular school shooters? I don't know. Like I can't really deal with this study because there's nothing there. It just lists 56, as far as I know, at random school shooters, and then goes and looks at what their household was like. And so I would just like to see something
It's the
more.
most, yeah, it was just, I think there's another one that goes with it. I was trying to see if I can find it, but it
Please,
was
yeah.
the most reported mass shooters, right? So they weren't trying to look at like every mass shooter, but instead they were trying to look at like these ones that are in the media all the time, like these, like the ones that get all of this attention that like everyone is talking about, to be like, no, these
Yeah, but
shooters.
I
are
would
what
say that's
everyone's
a
talking about.
silly variable to use to choose. But that's me. I don't know. Like so.
Right, but it's about debunking the myth of that specifically. Like it's not about.
Yeah, if these are
It's
the
not
ones that are
about,
getting all
like,
the
gang
attention,
violence.
and somehow the myth exists that they're all coming from stable household. Like, it
Yeah, that's
doesn't
crazy.
affect
I don't
the-
think that these are, first off, I would say that the vast majority of these people are literally unknown to the vast majority of people, both watching this panel and at large. I think if I was to poll people with like 90, I would say 90% of these names, people don't know them. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know how they're quantifying these as getting the most media attention. But really what's really interesting to me is I decided, let me go through some of this list myself. I stopped at the second one, Edward Alloway. Father, alcoholic factory worker. That's what we're talking about now.
Father in the home.
Well, yeah, not just in the home, had a job, but because he was an alcoholic, that means that this is one that we'll call as unstable.
Yeah, having an alcoholic parent is an unstable household, Fanatic.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, you're right.
Alcoholism is.
Woo, we hear that's some white fragility today. Let's keep going.
Wait, hold on. Why would you call that white fragility? Do you think that's?
Oh, you know exactly why the freak I'd call it white
it's because you're
fragility.
racist, right? But, so,
sure, okay, let's say
okay,
it.
so an alcoholic parent,
He's
you
a
think that's a
science-denying
stable
racist
living
on top
environment
of
for a child?
You said what's that? I'm sorry?
You think an alcoholic parent is going to be able to provide a stable living environment for a child?
Probably not. I don't think that would be entirely stable, but I think it's really insane to me that we're looking for justifications and reasons for why these white folks are shooting up these schools, yet we obviously see like how much black people have to endure, yet we're not shooting up schools at the same rates. Why do you think that is? Do you not think that alcoholism is more prevalent in the black community than it is? Do you not think that more unstable homes are found in the black community than they are in the white community?
We have
So
plenty of
freaking literally,
examples of
when we have
black
data
race,
that
right?
shows that 75% of black babies are born out of wedlock, and then you have the audacity to try to say, well, the reason why these white folks are shooting up these schools is because of unstable homes. You got to understand the mismatch here.
But Fanatic, on the black side, you have a culture that pushes them into like gangs and whatnot, and we have plenty of examples of random black rage happening all over the fucking country all the time.
Random black rage resulting in school shootings,
resulting in murder, resulting in just people being beat to death in the fucking.
Most of the time, I don't think it's random white rage. Most of the time, most of the violence that we're talking about when we're talking about like the violence that black people go back. No. I'm not going back to white rage. I'm saying that most of the violence that we're talking about when we're talking about black folks is talking about gang violence. Most of the homicides associated with black people is gang violence. It's not just random black rage.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay, so then what are you talking about specifically?
I can find you plenty of examples. You just Google it for 10
Sure, you can find an example of anything. Of course, we're a country of over 36 million people. 336 million people. What are you talking about? He's not worth engaging in either.
Doobie, you can go to the Mother Jones article I linked you a while ago. That one has a lot of examples you can pull.
Yeah, there's tons of examples of black people just randomly attacking people in the street that weren't involved in any arguments or gangs or anything like this, just walking by and punching somebody in the fucking face or kicking them down the stairs or beating the shit out of them or whatever the fuck, right? For no fucking reason. Are we going to call that black rage? Like, is that what you're going to call that?
Fanatic.
Why am I even? Don't ask me to engage with this. This is stupid. Go ahead.
Well, hold on.
Right. Now it's three people on the panel you refuse to engage with, and you pivot and scream and you deny.
I'm screaming.
And
I'm screaming. You're absolutely right.
Let me.
You're right. I'm screaming.
Let me give it a try. Right. So, Fanatic. Could it be that
you're black? Maybe he'll talk to you.
More likely than Fabian. That's for sure.
We got that skinship going on. But Fanatic. So in terms of like this expression of violence, right? You're saying that if we look at poverty and like the ravages of poverty, that so many more African American kids have to deal with that, and maybe even more severely than white children, right? Okay, and then you're trying to say that because of that, like if we look at the rates, right, of these school shootings, if you're relating that to the ravages of poverty or things associated with it, like fatherlessness or alcoholism and that stuff, right? You would say that, well, if we look at it over on the black side, and we don't have this same sort of outrage expressed in that way in terms of specifically school shootings, right, and the mass school shootings and the way that people think of, right? Am I following correctly?
Sure,
so far?
For the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. Could it be that it? And I think this is where Doobie was trying to go. That it's not simply that that black individuals don't do these things. Is that it's simply expressed in a different way. That outrage, that different populations express these symptoms in different ways. Right.
The reason why I wouldn't even interact if Dewey was saying something so ridiculous and retarded is because if the conversation that we're having is specifically about school shootings, then to pivot to another point and say, well, look, maybe black people aren't shooting schools, but they are doing other things, then basically what you're just making the argument for, hey, fatherlessness in the home and these other adverse situations are bad, which we all know that, but we're not talking about whether these things are bad. What we're talking about is if they're related to school shootings, and if they're related to school shootings and they are also present in niggas, but niggas ain't going and shooting up schools, then that means that that's probably not what's causing these school shootings. So it sounds like you're either just choosing to ignore that, or I don't know what the freak, but that can't be the cause, right?
Fanatic, have you? Because this is speculation, right? But once, like, it seems
the
like
dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Well, it's
baby, no one's talking to you. Move on.
It's speculation.
Sorry, go ahead, Lactoid.
But like, it could be because we're seeing, kind of, the random white rage attacks, and then when it's black people who are shooting in schools, it's usually related to a gang. Could it be that with if gangs weren't because white kids aren't getting invited to gangs, if gangs weren't so common among the black population, you would have more black rage shootings in the same way you have white rage shootings, because the people who would to get that rage or whatever, who have those rage issues, like the black ones, have an easier time joining a gang. Could that be something here?
No, I don't think so. And the reason why is because, look, for one, the reason why we call it white rage is because to me, it makes sense to me. When it's typically when you see higher incidences of violence associated with poverty or higher incidents of violence associated with other adversity, those things make sense. But what we find a lot of times when it comes to white people is that they have some of these incidents of violence that aren't directly related to anything, where it's whoa, it's really crazy. He was a quiet kid, stuck to himself. I never would have imagined anything like this. And then he goes and shoots up a school. And so it seems like there's something else happening here, where there's this unfounded rage that doesn't make any freaking sense, considering all of the benefits and privilege and opportunities these people have, some of them coming from stable homes and things like that. And that's what I'm talking about. So
Sure.
yes,
No,
is it
this
possible?
is-
I mean, you could
this is
probably
literally-
try your best.
Is
You could
this-
probably try your best to sit here and say well, maybe it's just that the black people are finding other outlets for their rage. But here's the craziest thing: when the vast majority of black people are from broken homes or not from are born out of wedlock, 75%, you gotta see some sort of correlation there, but you're not. So to me, it's this is the most unfounded, spurious connection you could possibly make.
Okay, so
This is-
Scott,
this
So
is the
I
same-
just wanna
no,
ask-
you-
Sorry.
you have to interject.
No, you don't, Scott. Don't talk to me, nigga. No one's talking to you.
I want Latcher to finish your point. And I want to hear from
Thank
Corey,
you.
then Scott, then Wick. Okay.
one last question, and this is related to this, because the link that Scott put forward said that, well, actually, it seems like even the white school shooters have pretty broken households. But if it's not attributed, if your theory here that is that this increase of white male rage shootings is not necessarily attributed to the reaction that white students have to broken homes as opposed to other outlets. I mean, do you have any theory as to why this is happening? I mean,
As
that you
to
can
white?
say that's not violating TOS, I guess.
As to white, this thing is happening.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, look, it's really, if you just look at it, I mean, it's I probably shouldn't say what my theories are, but what I will say is, I would say that this list is not
Some
an actual
racist
study.
shit.
No, I didn't say anything. I didn't even say what the reason is. You can't accuse me of racism if I haven't even said what it is. I'm just saying that, there's, some folks have had some issues and they're doing some crazy stuff. Maybe it could be calcified pineal glands. Who the freak knows? All I know is that there is a specific race that has this association and the other one
There it
doesn't.
is.
So I think when you start trying to make these
We
Yeah,
don't have
it's
the-
like, yeah,
Okay.
no, no, no,
Okay.
no, no,
So
no,
I
no,
can't-
yeah,
I
and
can't-
no,
my
no,
thoughts
no,
don't
connected
matter.
to
Hold on,
that.
hold on, hold on.
Exactly what I was
He
gonna
doesn't
say.
even hear you. So hold on. Let me,
I don't care. Other people make it.
hold on. Okay, I'll have to look up calcified pineal gland. I don't know what that is, but I'm sure it's gonna make me
Oh,
upset.
I can tell you all about it.
But
No, he can't. Ask him, Prime. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't even know what that means.
Okay, before I'm
No,
gonna
I can tell you all fucking about this
okay,
racist
look,
conspiracy theory
You
shit.
are okay. Both of you, Scott and Wick, you are both up, right? After our friend Corey, who's talked much less than both of you, right? I just want to ask one other question before we go to our friend Corey. And could it not be the case that looking at moving away from school shootings, right? Looking at abused kids, kids that were sexually abused, some of them, a portion, I don't know how big that portion is, but a portion of them will grow up and reoffend, right? They'll take that, someone assaulted them and then they will assault someone in the later years, right? Now you could say, well, you have this large population of individuals. Why isn't it the case that all of them are offending, right? In that way, right? Grow up to be offenders. Could it maybe but you wouldn't say that them being assaulted as children had nothing to do with it. Could then maybe the case that there's multiple variables, right? So if looking at that school shooting list, if we look at and see there's a lot of fatherlessness, right? Well, that's one ingredient. And then maybe we have maybe poverty or maybe a lack of a support system, right? And then something else, right? We could come up with a whole list of these things, right? So that all comes together and that equals this problem, right? Like to get a kid that'll do these types of things, you have to have a confluence of factors, and that equals school.
And one of those things is whiteness. It seems like, because otherwise, I don't understand why so many of these things are Caucasian in nature.
Okay. But could whiteness be expressed as in this particular
school
case?
shootings? Well, yeah, it obviously is.
Could whiteness be a rather than like skin color, right? Which I'm not entirely sure you're necessarily trying to say, but like
he's literally
how
saying that
society maybe he is. Okay, so I'm gonna look that up. But maybe how society treats white people, how they're able to move through society. So those white individuals, right? Like they
being
can't
treated too nice, and so they just don't know how to contain themselves.
So
what the freak else could it be?
It's like a cultural, like literally a cultural artifact, right, within our society. And so maybe like that comes with an entitledness, right? Not them being white, but being entitled. Like I am white and I'm supposed to be in charge of the world. That would fulfill your qualification of whiteness, but it wouldn't be because of their white skin.
Sure, it would be like that sense of like, yo, I'm supposed to be in charge of the world. This is why I can oppress everybody else, and so on and so forth. Why I don't have any accountability, and all of those kinds of things, which could lead to a school shooting. I could see the pressure that they have to like kind of redo what their ancestors did and be oppressive to the people around. I could see that leading to it. Sure, that's fair.
Okay, all right, Corey.
Okay,
this is crazy.
So I'm going to attempt to build a bridge, and I might be very poor at it. So I think there's a point to be made in terms of like, so I'm going to link 2 studies in the Discord chat in terms of like, to my point of like mass shootings and the association between, income inequality and mass shootings. There's at least 2 studies that I'm going to link. So when it comes to, what, to your point, Fanatic, of why is, mass shootings maybe disproportionately carried out by white people, and that, all the features that Scott brings up, like it happens in the Black communities, but you're not seeing these mass shootings. I think a potential explanation, especially if there's an association between income inequality and mass shootings, which there is, but an association, well, marginalized communities have remained, there's been improvements, but they've remained marginalized, and that they are still largely economically disadvantaged. As opposed to like in the white community, now they're sort of like, some of them are getting a taste of maybe what it's like to be marginalized. And like the mass shootings might be their way of expressing that violence. In terms of like, it's, they don't have necessarily the exposure to gangs, or as like Lactoid brought up, they're not invited to gangs. Whether that's how it works or not, I have no idea. But like, yeah, sort of like as a result of the growing income inequality, whereas like, in Black communities, I don't know for sure, but I would sort of suspect that within sort of like the isolated Black communities, like it's equal, but they're like are obviously largely disadvantaged, as opposed to like in white communities. When white communities are compared to like other white communities, there's like this growing income inequality, and therefore you might be seeing this increase in mass shootings isolated to white people.
I could see that maybe, and that's very possible. I just hope that maybe someone can find a study that shows that. I mean, I'm the only. There's only a few Black people on this panel. I'm hoping that maybe some of you white guys could actually explain to me why your people are doing that, doing these things. I don't know for sure. I'm just like throwing out.
Well, I can tell you why it's not. I'll be clear why it's not.
That's my working hypothesis.
It could be.
Not white.
Look,
I'm
I'll be clear why it's not.
Wait, what are you?
The tone of my skin has nothing to do with how violent I are. If you honestly believe that the tone of your skin has anything to do, right? You might as well mute it. You don't understand these concepts. That's okay. The grown-ups are talking. So why don't you sit your ass down and listen for a minute? So the idea to suggest that the tone of someone's skin has anything to do with how violent they are is just straight up racism. It's David Duke shit. It's David Duke shit. And I want to call that out, and I want to be very, very clear right now. Race essentialism, race realism, that's some bullshit. And it's just telling, right, who this is coming from. Like, I just want people to remember this for his arguments that some people don't care about racism. They only care when it happens to them. That's all. That's all I have to say.
No, I think he has a point. I was sitting in class and I was thinking, I just have this urge just to press, and I can't I just can't get it out. Okay.
That's why he comes here. That's why he comes on the project, right? He's gonna impress me with his libertarian ideas. Go ahead. Thank you so much. Scott.
Maybe there will be a substantive conversation. I doubt it. On the second topic, maybe someday Corey Campbell and I can, talk together where we can be done with the screaming about the data, because we tend to have those conversations from time to time. Actually,
Among white
looking
men.
into the data.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
Well,
But
I mean,
kidding.
among people
I'm-
that are actually
kidding.
looking at it, but in terms of, you can't even explain the pineal gland thing that he just kind of snuck in there, right? Just in case you're curious what pineal gland calcification is all about, it's a bunch of pseudoscientific garbage from racists that believe that because of the part of the human evolution, we lost our melanin in order to adapt to living and moving into Europe, and that lack of melanin actually created deformed brains, and that we're not
Yeah,
spiritually
David Duke shit.
connected,
Right.
and that our brain is damaged from being in environments where our skin is too white, and that this makes us inherently oppressors and violent people, and that Black people are more spiritually connected and their brains aren't malformed because we as humans evolved in Africa and we're meant to be under an African climate, and that's the area that like our body is suited for. And white people, and that this suggesting that is what he's suggesting, is that white people are inherently evil, violent oppressors from genetic race realism, and that our brains could be damaged from our lack of melanin, and that we're fucked up.
I looked it up, and it says the pineal gland does make melatonin, which is a different thing.
melatonin.
Yeah,
It's a connection. It's a connection between the skin color and the supposed damage.
Yeah.
But what does melatonin do for us though? Like, right? Melatonin is like it's a good thing. It helps us to be more relaxed and things like that. And so then it's like, yeah, I can imagine the amount of rage that would, like I don't have to explain it. Thanks, Fabian, for giving everyone a rundown on what the pineal gland is. I get it. Like it's.
I mean, do you have a source that like disproves this, Scott? I'm just curious.
I don't think he does. I guarantee you he doesn't. He's calling it pseudo-intellectualism. I guarantee you can't find me a single study that shows that white people's pineal glands aren't calcified or anything like that. It's crazy.
You know what? I didn't come prepared tonight to talk about whether or not police officers should be in schools or private security. To have to debunk Black racist race realism.
Black people can't be racist.
Yeah,
that's bait. That's bait. Don't take it. Don't take it. It's bait.
Okay. Wow.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, if you get him mad enough, the Marx comes out in him. It's just the philosophy speaks through him.
Prejudice, right?
It's just very unchristian of him. That's all.
Okay. All right. Speaking of which, I didn't get a chance to talk about what I want to talk about, which is the
religion
in school. Yeah, because I think. All right, I'll try. We got some time remaining, but sorry. Before I do that, Waterkai and Doobie, since you guys haven't had a chance to talk, before I jump in, do you have anything to add?
I've been wanting to say for a while, I don't agree with having random dads in schools. If some random dude decided to talk to my kid, I'd have an issue with it. The same with if an officer tried to break up a fight and my kid came home and said, yeah, the officer had his hand by his taser the whole time. I was real shook, and now my kid needs counseling. I'm not cool with that either. So that was where I was trying to get to.
Yeah, just really quick to add on top of that, to piggyback off of that. Like, if you remember, there was that situation where there was those kids and they were fighting, and the cops go over there. The white kid had aggressed on the black kid. They go over there and they immediately start arresting the black kid while they just go ahead and have the white kid sit down. Like, are you okay? While they're arresting the black kid, and the black kid was the one that had been aggressed upon, and all those kind of things. We've seen how those kind of situations go. It's gross.
Let's go to Doobie. Do you have anything to add?
Not really. I found it really interesting that Fnatic was so willing to get into the, race equals crime thing, given the disproportionate amount of violent crime that Black people commit in the United States, like across the board, sexual assault, robberies,
white people rape more,
murder.
The numbers
murder. No, that's not true.
Factually,
hold on.
Factually, the majority of sexual assaulters.
I didn't say majority. I said disproportionately to their population size. That's what I said. Right. So if you're
I'm pretty sure white people are like 75% of all rapes.
You're just fucking crazy if you're gonna disagree with that. Black people
No,
are disproportionately
no.
across the board. If you want to
Oh,
single out
okay.
rape because it makes you feel better, you can. Do
Well, no, that was just one of the things that you
Across the board,
mentioned.
Black people
Not
are
even for
far
rape.
more
Not
far
even
more
for
than
rape.
any other people are
That was just one
disproportionately
of the things you
represented
mentioned.
in violent crime in this country. So I think it's really interesting that you'd even want to get into the fucking tying race to violent crime shit. It's really fucking weird.
I'm not trying race to all that violent crime. What I did say for sure is
school shootings.
No. Well, yeah, specifically the school shootings. Well,
As if
it
we
is
don't
a
have
form of white
examples
rage.
of random black violence all over the fucking United States every fucking day.
I feel like, hey,
Look,
listen,
if this was a
we
white
can
person
engage
saying
because,
this about
like,
blacks or Jews, he'd be kicked off the panel.
well,
Yeah,
He'd
you're
probably be
Fanatic,
in
you're
trouble
literally
for
you're on
Twitch.
some Nick Fuentes shit right now, Fanatic. Like literally.
what are you talking?
You
This is
are,
crazy.
absolutely.
This is
Y'all
David
are
Duke shit. Like,
y'all
no,
are
you
nuts.
know,
Okay. I guess I'm just not supposed to
Like, hey,
have
well, black
opinions.
people, they just have a warrior gene, and this just leads them to being more violent and being more aggressive and attacking people and raping people, wanting to murder people,
why you
etc.
gotta go there? This is crazy.
This is on the level of the shit that you were doing.
He's just asking questions.
You're at, like, Nick
That's all-
Fuentes level.
Right, that's I'm saying I can't even ask questions. They don't want me to ask questions. I just gotta sit here and
ask
just
questions.
this
I
is
just think it's
crazy.
strange that you didn't even want to get into that, given the disproportionate
It's a
amount of violent crime
good
black
lesson
people-
for
black
my
people in the
audience,
United
at
States.
least.
But I accept
It's
that
lesson for
black
my
people.
audience.
I accept that black people commit a large amount of violent crime.
every day.
I've never denied that in any
Random
capacity.
old
The thing
ladies
is, what I'm
getting
always
punched in the
pointing
face
out
for no
that
fucking
is we
reason
can
by
tie
black women
black
just for walking
violent
by.
crime to things like poverty and things like that. Like we can tie those things. It seems like even in absence of poverty, that white
the
rage
point-
knows no
But the
bounds.
point, Fanatic,
That's
but
the
point, Fanatic,
difference.
the
I don't
point
understand why
was
we would even
making
be trying
is
to
that
make
what
this
you just said
correlation
is a
when you know
myth.
that.
What you just said is a
Knows no
myth.
bounds.
Because the
White
school
rage
shooters,
knows no
these school
bounds.
shooters that you're talking
Coming.
about,
Dibby.
actually, most of these people come from broken homes, dysfunctional families, impoverished homes.
I don't think there's
What
any
you
way
just
for you
said
to
is a
prove that.
myth. Well, we pulled up a couple studies about it. Pull up some.
No, wait. That wasn't a study. That wasn't a
Pulls
study.
up something
Number one,
pulls
that
up
wasn't a
something
study.
that disproves that idea. That
No,
proves
that wasn't a
this myth that you're
study.
pushing.
So if you
Pull
got a
up
study to
something,
prove that, that's
anything
one thing.
that
But just to
disproves-
prove
that proves
a
this
guy
myth that you're
with
pushing.
selection bias
Or is this
who's
just a
listing
feeling
things
that you
like,
have? You
well,
just
his
have a
dad
feeling
was
that
an
people
alcoholic,
come
so
from
that
stable
justifies it. Freak out
Hold
of
on,
here.
hold on. Do
If
you
you're
just have a
setting the
feeling
bar so low as
that
an
these people come from
alcoholic
stable
father,
homes, or is
I'm
there something
sorry,
that
Go ahead,
Teddy.
that you're pointing to prove this? Or is it just a feeling? Because you haven't posted anything that would indicate that what you're saying is true.
So here's the craziest thing, Doobie. When people tell me to post things like in order to prove points
Okay,
and
here's-
stuff,
here's-
I got you. I'm willing to do that unless it's something that where we obviously know that this is like facts,
It's
right?
not
Like,
obvious,
nobody
obviously
here,
not obvious.
nobody.
Anybody here,
Okay,
but
wait,
we're all
hold on.
disagreeing with
Okay, I got you. So let me just ask you this question: are the vast majority of school shooters white?
Yes.
Okay, so why do I need a study to prove that? What
Hold
are you
on,
talking about?
that's fucking stupid, right? Because
Why are
what we're
you
talking about
lying?
isn't just that they're white; it's that these people specifically come from broken homes, typically, right? They're not coming from stable homes. Being white doesn't equal stable home. That's a pretty racist fucking thing for you to think.
That's racist. I'm just
Yeah.
saying. Okay,
Why would
do
you
we not?
assume that a white person comes from a stable home?
Do you? I'm sorry. Do you think that I didn't say that? Number one, I'm not making the statement that white people all come from
Oh,
stable
you're not-
homes.
you're
But
not-
what I am making the statement is that white people come from more stable homes on average than black folks.
We're not
yet
talking
white
about
people,
the average white person. We're
Right,
talking
I
about
got
school
you. I
shooter.
got you. But if we're going to say that white people on average come from more stable homes than black people, yet white people make
We're
up
talking
the
about school shooters.
But I got you. And yet white people make up. This is a compound logic here. White people the majority of white people come from stable homes. The majority of school shooters are white people. Yet, so if stable homes are the factor that are leading towards these school shootings, then it seems like that there's a mismatch here, right?
Again, we're not talking about the average white person. We're talking about outliers within this group. And to be clear, there are school shooters of other races. In fact, I found just in my fucking
Sure, they
10
exist.
minutes
They're
of
just
Google,
rare.
just in my 10 minutes of Google searching, I found multiple articles that said, I didn't have a chance to look through them, that it's actually proportionate to the population, right? So you're going to find that white people are the majority, but you're also going to find that every other racial group has school shooters that is closely linked to the proportion of the population of that races.
So you're saying that?
So what I'm saying,
that's fact. That's not fact. Show me that. Link me that. Link it.
Okay,
You said you
haven't
found it.
linked
Link
shit.
it.
I'm not gonna link anything. Link
Oh,
something
okay.
that
All
proves
right,
a myth
I got
that
it.
you're
Yeah.
link something.
No.
proves a myth that
You're
you're
asking me to prove the thing
These
that we
school
already
shooters
know.
specifically-
Prove that
not
school
white
shooters are
people-
white.
Not white people
Prove that
on
they got
average.
raped.
Not white people
Prove
on
that
average.
white
Not
people have
on average.
calcified
But these
pineal
school
glands.
shooters
Prove,
specifically
why are you asking me
coming
to
from
prove things that
stable
we all
homes.
know?
Post that. Post that.
Okay.
Don't just say that we know
So
it's
I
true,
gotta prove
or that you
things
have
like white
faith
people
in
have
that.
calcified pineal glands. I
Post
gotta prove
something
that school shooters are
that
white.
says that
I gotta
school
prove the
shooters
stuff
on
that we
average
all
come from
know.
stable homes,
Yeah,
'cause
this
that's
is
the fucking lie that
crazy,
you're pushing.
bro. This
Okay,
is
it's
crazy.
not
Why would
the
I prove the
claim
things
that
that we already know and accept?
school
And
Yeah,
shooters
we're
are
just
white.
gonna
It's not
accept
the
the bullshit
claim.
because you said it, of course.
Look,
No,
it's
you
not.
agree. You know that the
Not-
vast majority of school shooters are white.
That's not
Come
what, that's not what
on.
we're talking about. That is not
It's
what we're
Okay.
talking about.
Therefore,
You're
Okay.
lying right now.
therefore, after this
All
is
right.
a problem. It's like this is a fact. Therefore, this must be true because of this fact. And I think that's where you're missing everyone, Fanatic. And I know you can't hear me, but it doesn't fucking matter, right? So, when you make a claim like this is a data point, this is true, this is what we can see, and then you extrapolate from that claim in these wild ways, saying, "Well, calcified pineal glands means that white people are more prone to rage and violence." It's wild and it's weird and it's just not scientific. It's not data driven. It's crazy, to be frank. It's clown
But
shit.
just
Right now.
bottom line, no people, no matter what race they're from, have any innate particular characteristic that is going to be just them. No people are more violent. No people are more prone to steal. No people are prone to any of these things that we're saying. It is purely based on whatever they go through in life and the status that they're in.
I agree with that, Lee.
I don't know that whole thing about white rage doesn't seem to me entirely untrue. Look, when I think of endless white rage, I think of my friend Lactoid. Right? This is why my pet name for him is the Incredible Hulk. Because once this man gets started, you can't stop him, right? So
One time, I get mad one time, and all of a sudden I'm like white rage.
We saw it. No, we did see what happens, and the thing is that we just got to be smart, and you're strategic with it. When you're like doing things that can upset some types of people, some people, automatically to hold back a little bit, and like I might take little jabs, like I'll call them lactate and stuff, but you see me always peppering it up also and saying things like he's one of the best people to interact with in these panels, because I know that there's limits to how far you can push him. I want schools to be safe. Aside from just arming them, aside from what you guys are talking about with more armed guards and things like that, I think we choose how we can keep schools safe with some of our interactions, and I choose and govern my actions accordingly. And that's what I'm doing here.
Yeah. Just be nice to white people.
Solution was
good.
reparations, dude.
But yeah,
the solution was science denial and then reparations, and then to turn the entire conversation about race, because you're a racist. And I know you can't hear me, but like the audience should know that. Like you shouldn't be invited to panels.
I can hear you. You're just not important.
Have a substantive conversation.
It seems like the problem to me is that we're trying to distill it to one thing, or at least the conversation is being pushed in that direction, but I don't think that anyone here is really trying to do that. So I don't think Scott is trying to say, and maybe I'm wrong, Scott, so you can correct me if I am, that fatherlessness is the only variable here.
Obviously not.
Okay, yeah, right. Yeah.
I'm not saying white skin is the only variable either. I wasn't saying that.
Dog, you're just a known racist.
You're saying it's a variable.
What?
Just own it. You think white people are inferior because of our fucked up brain.
So here's the data. Here's the data on number of mass shootings in the United States between 1982 and 22 by race. 70 of those things were white, 21 were black, 11 were Latino, 8 were Asian, 5 were other, 3 were Native American. So then if we look at it,
you realize you make up 13% of the population, right? Like you just said that black people were overrepresented in mass shootings.
So we do make up 13. We make up 13% of the population. What percentage of the population do white people make?
It's about like 70.
It's from 1960s.
You think white people make up 70% of the population? No. Don't you do that to me, like.
So including like Hispanic whites, it's probably like 75.
No, they distinguish whites. They distinguish whites and Hispanics.
Yeah, well, what's the number? It's 50, right?
So it depends, right? So you have like Hispanic whites.
Now you want to know the methodology, and that's fine. You can. I'm just saying that it's not proportionate. Y'all white folks have been going ham, and I'm not trying to piss you off. I'm just being honest with you. You know that your people have been going ham, and you need to get them.
Currently,
sounds like the Asians are just getting the short end of the stick.
Currently,
that's racist.
It's roughly 55%.
I got you, Lactate. You hear Lactate? He's taking shots, and nobody's gonna call him out. He's not racist because he's white. See, Fabian won't call out Lactate when he makes racist statements. That was obviously a double entendre.
I didn't make a racist statement.
He said Asian people are getting the short end of the stick. What do you think he means by that?
Yeah, what I could say, well, based on the numbers you put forward, it seems like both white people and black people are overrepresented in committing shootings. Asian people just don't seem to do it as much, according to what you said.
Currently, white people make up about 55-56% of the population. Okay. But if you go back to the 1960s, I don't know the exact. I don't. You said it was
in the
starting in the
80s to the
60s.
2020.
Was
82.
it the 80s?
Between
Okay,
82 and
82 to
2022.
2020.
Okay, so even if we go back to 82, you'd be at like 65%. So white
Is
people
it
and
in
blacks
82?
would
And
be
was it
overrepresented.
65 and 82?
Let's look at the
'Cause-
1980s. Let's look at the
Yeah, look it
1980
up.
census.
Yeah, look it up.
Either way,
I don't
almost
think it would
like
have been 65%
white and
because I know
black people seem to be
our population
overrepresented
stayed
in this
pretty
statistic
similar all
here.
this time. It's like,
And I don't
yeah,
think that we
it's-
can
yeah, so
once again, skin
I
tone
don't know.
doesn't matter
let's
here.
find
I
it.
don't think
Maybe-
skin tone matters in
maybe.
this case.
I would
Maybe
like to know those
brave
numbers.
case.
So, sorry, Fanatic, we can still hear you. But
I was talking
Uh,
to him. I was talking to Fabian.
oh, but
He has me muted
Talking
because
over
I'm
Wick.
dumb
Yeah.
when I
Wait, hold on.
repeated.
So
Oh,
why do
I'm
you
sorry,
think
my
black
bad.
people are overrepresented in that number that you read out?
It's probably
black
because I would imagine that it's because they're listing
Gang
school shooting.
violence.
It's because they're listing all of these like mass shootings, like I said earlier, where there like might be a
Of
situation
course.
where you have like a gang confrontation and things like that, and so then they'll try to label that as the same ones as these white rage shootings.
Oh, I see. So wait, so how do we know that none of the 70% in the white category aren't like those situations where there's some kind of fight or some kind of altercation and someone put out a gunshot?
Wait, how do we know none of the seven? So I would imagine some of them are, but it's just that gang participation.
And then we
within
can't
the
use the
white-
numbers at all.
Well, hold on. It's just that gang participation within the white community is so absolutely abysmally small that like the fact that this would be like that it would be a factor that would really throw off these numbers seems a little unrealistic. But considering
but
the fact
you don't
that
need to have a gang to
considering
pull
the
out a gun
fact that
during a
black
fight.
gang participation is so much higher, then you can obviously understand why these numbers.
Hold on,
would be thrown
but
off in
you
that.
don't
Yeah,
need to
there's
have a
more
gun to
than
pull out a
just two
gun during a
types of
fight,
shootings.
right? Like,
Right? There's not
Yeah,
just
sometimes-
mass shootings and gang shootings.
Wait,
There are
what
other
are you
shootings
saying?
that
Let-
make up a
what are you-
large.
sometimes kids just
Let-
being bullied or something, and he
let
pulls out a
TB go.
gun when his bully's fucking with him, right?
I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's a
so it
required
seems
thing
like
for
your
white
numbers
folks to
aren't
start
useful at
shooting
all.
stuff up.
They do it all the time. What? I don't know. People kill people all the time for a variety of reasons, not just at school in general, right? Like I knew a person in one of my old neighborhoods who shot. They had an altercation over a football game, and one of them shot the other. Right, just two white people. Right, and this happens. Right, violence happens. When we talk about like again. This idea that every white person is doing this specific type of mass shooting, isn't engaged in other types of violence is weird. It's just not backed up by the stats you gave.
According to Wikipedia, I can just find it right here. Okay, that makes it. Yeah. Oh, I got the right numbers. That the percentage of white people in America in 1980, and specifically the year 1980, 83.1% is.
Yeah. I was finding 84%, but I wanted to find it from the census itself.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I haven't
Oh,
found
wow.
it yet. But yeah,
I guess they were
So-
actually
we were
underrepresented.
underrepresented. Well, I mean, you have to combine the two, right? Because it's 70% over a period of time from 82 to currently, and now we're at like 56%. So it probably averages out to maybe 70%. It seems like
Well, there was
it
much
would be
more
difficult
school
to tell.
shootings now
Was that
than there
whites
were back
including
then.
Right, there's
Hispanics,
more
though?
school shootings now than there wasn't, but like but again, my point still stands that like if you compare it just to today, that doesn't really make sense because in 1980 we were 84%. But I also want to look at it to see if in 84 if they were actually separating Hispanic Latino,
That's what I
right?
was gonna say.
In
There's
that,
no
in
way.
that way too.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, like
couldn't
they
have
were, well, so because as far as the census data is concerned, right? White is Hispanic Latino is an ethnicity, not a race. Some years, and some years it is.
Yeah.
Right.
So sometimes it'll be counted
changed.
separately as an ethnicity. So that might be including Hispanics some years and not other
Sure.
years. But
Yeah.
regardless, like there's
It was
plenty of
just-
articles talking about how like
Yeah,
it was 11.8%. Now it's 13%. So the population of blacks has obviously risen in proportion, and the same with Latinos.
Yeah, I don't know about in proportion, but I just know that like this last year was I think the first time where it actually
We have the lowest
declined.
birth rates. We have the lowest birth
Uh,
rates except Asians. And we have had them for like
And for
50,
non-Hispanic
60 years.
whites in 1980, it's 79.6%. In Wikipedia, they break it out. So 79.6% for
Oh, okay,
non-Hispanic whites.
79%. Okay, all right, there we go.
Okay.
So that's the number, 79%.
Sure. Sounds like a solid truth there. I don't know. I look, at the end of the day, I really don't have the answers for the rage. I don't know what causes it. Well, I mean, I would imagine probably what causes it is some of the misconceptions, right? Like the idea that they're the most oppressed group. I remember there was a study that they had done where they were asking these like white college age kids who, like in I want to say like 2008, and they were asking them who was the most oppressed group of people, and they said they were. And it's
Obviously,
just like,
we're losing
come on.
Ariel. Haven't you seen that?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's crazy.
I mean, like,
No, the
but y'all
gingers
niggas
are
stole
losing Ariel,
Jesus.
not you.
Y'all stole Jesus and are complaining about the Little Mermaid. It's crazy. It's freaky.
Come on.
White
That's facts.
fragility.
That's facts.
I mean,
That's facts.
I mean,
He
like,
was like a
One
Jewish
fictional
Middle
character,
Easterner.
another
Come on.
fictional
how could
character.
you?
I mean, it's,
How could you argue? How could you argue that white people aren't the most oppressed? It's obviously that white people are the most oppressed.
By who?
what and what metric
Than
are you using,
any other
Fabian?
race in America.
Like, what
Okay,
metric
by
are you
who?
using? Most oppressed. What do
let's
you
use-
mean?
Right. If you're gonna try and have a nebulous idea of like inherent interactions of racism and standpoint epistemology and shit, then like, yeah, you could say that other races are more oppressed. But the fact remains is that you're allowed to be racist against white people in a way that you're not allowed to be racist towards other people, number one.
That
And number
is
two,
true.
there is such a thing as SAT situations that are now specifically designed to oppress white people. And there are
Nope.
specific jobs and people that are fighting to be able to have racial discrimination against white people as a means of enforcing equity. So
Okay.
it's literally true that white people are more oppressed.
And everyone
It's just a
here
fact.
everyone that just heard those words come out of Fabian's mouth now can clearly understand why I think he's retarded and beneath arguing with.
Oh, he was
We
being
can move
serious?
on.
I thought he was screwing with you.
Nah, he's
Ah.
being serious. He's retarded.
So-
Let's go to the next point though, y'all.
We will.
I mean,
we'll
So again, you have no arguments.
Oh,
Over and
yeah,
over
yeah,
again,
we
you have no
will-
arguments.
You think I'm gonna argue with you on something so ridiculous and retarded? You just don't understand me at all, buddy.
Scott,
You're not worth my time.
Scott, I agree with a lot of what you said. You should look.
Shut
at
up, Lactate. Don't you push
when
my
it-
button.
Hold on. But here's the thing, though. When you look at the affirmative action stuff, look at how it affects Asians compared to white people. So I don't think it's very. Yeah.
Definitely
Schools aren't
affects-
using affirmative
Like,
action, and they
white-
haven't been for
white
quite some time. They
people-
use adversity score. Do you not know that? Oh,
So-
Lactate. We'll talk about it off stream. We'll talk about it another time. Not have to be off stream. Just not here. But you can go ahead and make your point. I'm sorry.
I mean,
Go
you
ahead.
don't
Okay,
need to
so-
do it. You don't need
well-
to do it now, anyways, because it automatically like oppresses Asians slightly more than whites by race and SAT
Not
scores.
slightly. Not sligely. So we
No, I mean like
so-
in the new grade of like determining like what your
I
SAT
don't know if there's a
score
new
is.
one. Yeah.
Because the new SAT, like for college admissions, there's 100 points in there that specifically look at socioeconomic status, Gini coefficient, and your race. So you don't know.
Nope, and
as
not your
white
race.
or
You're a
Asian
liar.
Person.
It has nothing to do with race.
You don't know. You
They
don't
do adversity
know.
score,
Yeah, exactly. You don't know.
which has nothing to do with
It's
race.
like
Race is not a factor in adversity score. Liar.
Yes, it is.
Bet money right now. Race is a
money
factor
or
in
just
adversity score.
Let's look.
Race.
Might be
Hold up.
both. Okay.
Do you want to bet? How much you want to bet? Race is a factor in adversity score. Is that what you just said? You liar.
Bitch, relax. Everything I've seen.
Oh, you were
said that it
lying.
is, but
All right.
I might be
Okay. So
wrong.
you are lying. All right. I got it. You can move on. Go ahead. Keep on making your false points.
And so,
Okay, so we know it's 100 points. Let's see.
sorry. We already reached the end of this segment, so we're gonna move on.
Thank God.
Covered that religion real good.
When
Yeah,
you're done
right?
reading it, come back and tell me I'm right, Fabian.
Okay, all right.
Hey,
That's the
I
one
told-
time
I
you
told
can
I
talk
might be
to
wrong
me.
on this
We
because I
will-
knew that they were looking at all kinds of metrics on adversity and affirmative action.
Let's